The evening began like any other for Keanu Reeves, the actor known worldwide for his roles in blockbuster movies like The Matrix and John Wick. Dressed in his signature laid-back style, a black leather jacket, dark jeans, and a plain white t-shirt, he walked onto the set of Jimmy Kimmel Live. With an easygoing confidence that instantly put the audience at ease. The studio was buzzing with excitement as fans eagerly awaited what they assumed would be another fun and entertaining late-night interview. Little did anyone know this night would take a dramatic turn, leaving everyone talking about it for days to come. Keanu took his seat across from Jimmy Kimmel, who greeted him warmly, clearly thrilled to have such a big star on the show. The two exchanged casual pleasantries, laughing and joking as the audience clapped and cheered. Keanu's calm demeanor made him seem approachable, almost like a friend sharing stories rather than a global celebrity sitting under bright studio lights. For the first few minutes, everything went smoothly. Jimmy asked Keanu about his latest movie project, and Keanu responded enthusiastically, explaining how he prepared for the role and sharing funny behind-the-scenes anecdotes. He even joked about some of the stunts he performed himself, earning laughs from both Jimmy and the crowd. As the conversation continued, Jimmy decided to steer the discussion toward more personal territory. This wasn't unusual for his show. After all, Jimmy was known for asking unexpected or slightly edgy questions to keep things interesting. At first, Keanu handled these inquiries graciously, deflecting them with humor or giving vague answers that hinted at deeper thoughts without revealing too much. When Jimmy brought up rumors about Keanu's dating life, the actor simply smiled and said, "Well, I guess you'll have to stay tuned for my autobiography." The line got a huge laugh, and the mood remained light and playful. But then, Jimmy pushed a little harder. He mentioned a tabloid article claiming Keanu had been spotted out with someone new, implying there might be truth to the story. Though Jimmy delivered the question with a grin, it was clear he wanted details. Keanu's expression shifted ever so slightly. His smile didn't disappear entirely, but it became tighter, less natural. Instead of answering directly, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Sometimes I wonder if people forget I'm just a regular guy trying to live my life." The comment seemed to catch Jimmy off guard, and he quickly moved on to another topic, hoping to smooth over any awkwardness. For a moment, it felt like the tension might pass unnoticed, but Jimmy couldn't resist digging deeper, perhaps sensing an opportunity to create a memorable moment, or maybe just curious about whether Keanu would open up. He broached an even more sensitive subject: Keanu's past tragedies. Everyone knew about the heartbreaking losses Keanu had endured over the years, including the deaths of his daughter and his former partner. These events had profoundly shaped him, and while he rarely spoke about them publicly, they were no secret. Still, bringing them up during a lighthearted talk show segment felt risky, to say the least. Jimmy framed the question carefully, trying to sound empathetic. "Keanu," he said, leaning forward slightly as though to emphasize sincerity, "you've been through so much in your life. How do you manage to stay positive and keep going after everything?" On paper, it sounded like a thoughtful inquiry, the kind designed to inspire admiration for Keanu's resilience. But in practice, it hit differently. The room grew quieter as Keanu stared at Jimmy, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. Then, in a low, measured voice, Keanu replied, "I don't think this is the right place to talk about that." Jimmy, perhaps misinterpreting Keanu's tone, chuckled nervously and waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Keanu, we're all friends here," he quipped, attempting to lighten the mood. But instead of diffusing the tension, his words only made Keanu's discomfort more apparent. The actor shifted in his seat, his body language now stiff and guarded. A murmur rippled through the audience, though it was hard to tell if they were reacting to the growing unease or simply intrigued by the sudden shift in dynamics. Despite the mounting tension, Jimmy persisted. Maybe he believed he was doing Keanu a favor by helping him share his story. Or perhaps he thought pushing further would lead to a breakthrough moment that would make great television. Whatever his reasoning, he followed up with another question, this one even more pointed. "Do you ever feel like those experiences shape the roles you choose, like Does your own pain influence the characters you play? The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded, as Keanu stared at him. It was impossible to miss the flicker of frustration in Keanu's eyes. At this point, the atmosphere in the studio had changed entirely. What started as a cheerful, engaging interview now felt strained, almost uncomfortable. Some members of the audience exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to expect next. Others sat frozen, captivated by the unfolding drama. Meanwhile, Keanu appeared to be weighing his options, deciding how, or if, to respond. His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, it looked like he might let the question slide. But something inside him snapped. With a deep breath, Keanu sat up straighter, his earlier warmth replaced by a steely resolve. In a firm, unwavering voice, he said, "You've crossed a line." The words were simple yet carried immense weight. Jimmy blinked in surprise, momentarily, speechless. Before he could recover, Keanu elaborated, his tone sharp but controlled. "This isn't therapy. This isn't a platform for you to pick apart my life. I came here to talk about my work, not to relive my pain for entertainment." The audience gasped audibly, their collective shock palpable. Cameras continued rolling as Jimmy fumbled for a response, clearly unprepared for the situation spiraling out of control. He tried apologizing, his usual charm faltering under the pressure. Hey, I didn't mean anything bad by it," he stammered, holding up his hands defensively. But Keanu wasn't having it. With one final glance at Jimmy, he stood up abruptly, grabbed his water bottle, and walked off the stage without another word. As the studio erupted into chaos, Keanu disappeared behind the curtain, leaving Jimmy and the entire world stunned by what had just transpired. Backstage, the scene was utter chaos. Producers rushed around like ants whose nest had been disturbed, frantically trying to figure out what to do next. Some were shouting into headsets, coordinating with the control room about how to handle the live broadcast. Others scrambled to locate Keanu, hoping to convince him to return and salvage the situation. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel sat frozen in his chair on stage, staring at the empty seat across from him where Keanu had been just moments before. His face was a mix of shock, embarrassment, and confusion. The audience, still buzzing with disbelief, didn't know whether to clap, laugh, or stay silent. On the monitor screens visible to the crew, the broadcast had awkwardly cut to a commercial break. But even in those fleeting seconds, it was clear that something monumental had happened. Social media platforms were already lighting up with reactions as viewers who had been watching live began sharing clips and screenshots of the tense exchange. Hashtags like Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel Live started trending almost instantly. People couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. A Hollywood star walking off a major talk show because of an interviewer's questions. Behind the scenes, Keanu moved quickly through the narrow hallways of the studio, his footsteps echoing against the walls. He wasn't running, but there was a sense of urgency in his stride. A few members of his team trailed behind him, calling his name softly, urging him to stop so they could discuss what had happened. But Keanu kept moving, his expression unreadable. When he finally reached the exit door, he pushed it open and stepped outside into the cool night air. For a moment he stood still, taking deep breaths as if trying to steady himself after the whirlwind of emotions he'd just experienced. Outside, reporters and paparazzi who had gathered for the usual post-show coverage immediately noticed Keanu, emerging from the building. Cameras flashed wildly as microphones were thrust toward him, all eager to capture his reaction. "Keanu, what happened inside?" one reporter shouted. Another chimed in, "Did you really walk off the show?" The barrage of questions came fast and loud, creating a chaotic symphony of voices. Most celebrities would have ignored them or simply walked away, but not Keanu. Instead, he paused, turning to face the crowd. "I think everyone saw what happened," he said calmly, his voice cutting through the noise. Though his tone was measured, there was an undeniable edge to it, a quiet intensity that demanded attention. "I came here tonight to talk about my work, not to have my personal life dissected for entertainment." He paused briefly, letting his words sink in before continuing. "There are boundaries, and those boundaries matter. If speaking up means protecting my dignity, then I'll always choose to speak up." The reporters fell silent for a moment, stunned by Keanu's directness. It wasn't often that someone of his stature addressed such controversies head-on, especially mere minutes after they occurred. As the initial shock wore off, more questions followed, but Keanu held up a hand to signal he was done. Without another word, he turned and walked toward a waiting car parked nearby. The vehicle pulled away seconds later, leaving the journalist scrambling to piece together the story. Back inside the studio, Jimmy Kimmel tried to regain control of the situation. After several long, uncomfortable moments of silence, he leaned forward in his chair and addressed the audience directly. "Well, that was unexpected," he admitted, forcing a nervous laugh. His usual confident demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he looked visibly shaken. "Obviously, things got a little heated back there, and I want to say I'm sorry if anything I said made Keanu uncomfortable. That was never my intention." The apology felt sincere, but it did little to ease the tension in the room. The audience clapped politely, though their applause lacked energy. Many people were still processing what they'd just witnessed. Some whispered among themselves, speculating about why Keanu had reacted so strongly. Others simply stared at the stage, unsure of what to make of the whole ordeal. Even Jimmy seemed unsure of how to proceed. Normally, when a guest left early or something unusual happened, he had a clever quip or anecdote ready to smooth things over. But this time, no amount of charm could fix the damage. As the show returned from its second commercial break, Jimmy attempted to lighten the mood by cracking jokes about the incident. "Guess we'll have to edit that part out of the blooper reel," he joked weakly, earning only scattered laughter from the crowd. Realizing his efforts weren't working, he shifted gears, bringing on the next guest, a comedian, to try to distract viewers from the drama that had unfolded earlier. But despite the change in topic, it was impossible to ignore the elephant in the room. Every joke, every comment, seemed to circle back to Keanu's abrupt departure. Meanwhile, online, the conversation was exploding. Fans of Keanu praised him for standing up for himself, hailing him as a hero for refusing to let his private struggles become public spectacle. Tweets poured in celebrating his integrity, with many pointing out that celebrities deserve the same respect and privacy as anyone else. Memes began circulating, some poking fun at Jimmy's awkward handling of the situation, while others depicted Keanu as a fearless advocate for setting boundaries. Not everyone agreed, however. Some critics argued that Keanu had overreacted, suggesting that Jimmy's questions were typical for a late-night talk show and shouldn't have warranted such a dramatic response. Others defended Jimmy, saying he couldn't have predicted Keanu's reaction and that the actor should have handled the situation differently. A smaller group focused on the broader implications of the clash, debating whether interviews like these inherently exploited celebrities or if they were simply part of the job. Amidst the growing debate, clips of the confrontation spread rapidly across social media platforms. Viewers dissected every word, analyzing Jimmy's tone, Keanu's body language, and the subtle shifts in the atmosphere throughout the interview. Late-night hosts and morning news programs picked up the story, dedicating entire segments to discussing what had gone wrong. By the time dawn broke, it was clear that Keanu's decision to leave the show had sparked a cultural moment, one that wouldn't fade anytime soon. For Keanu, the aftermath was quieter but equally impactful. After leaving the studio, he retreated to a secluded location, avoiding further contact with the press. Friends and colleagues close to him revealed later that he had spent the evening reflecting on the events of the night, reaffirming his belief that certain topics should remain off-limits regardless of context. While some might have viewed his actions as career-damaging, Keanu saw them as necessary. In his mind, staying true to himself and protecting his emotional well-being was far more important than pleasing anyone else. By the next morning, the world was abuzz with opinions, theories, and reactions. Yet amidst all the noise, one thing remained undeniable. Keanu Reeves had once again proven himself to be a man of principle, unafraid to stand firm in the face of controversy. Whether people agreed with him or not, his actions had ignited a much-needed conversation about respect, boundaries, and the complex relationship between fame and vulnerability. And as the dust settled, it became clear that this wouldn't be the last time the world found itself talking about Keanu Reeves, not by a long shot. The morning after the explosive incident on Jimmy Kimmel Live, Keanu Reeves woke up to a world that seemed divided. Social media platforms were flooded with hashtags, memes, and heated debates about what had happened. Some people hailed him as a hero for standing up for his boundaries and refusing to let his personal life be exploited for entertainment. Others criticized him, accusing him of overreacting or ruining what should have been a fun late-night interview. Despite the mixed reactions, one thing was certain: everyone was talking about Keanu. For Keanu himself, the day began quietly. He stayed away from the internet, choosing instead to focus on simpler things: reading a book, taking a long walk, and spending time with close friends who offered their support. Those who knew him well understood that this wasn't out of character. Keanu had always valued authenticity and privacy, often shying away from the spotlight despite his immense fame. To him, walking off the show wasn't about making a statement. It was about protecting his dignity and setting clear limits. Still, he couldn't ignore the magnitude of what had transpired. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from colleagues, fans, and even strangers weighing in on the situation. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel faced his own challenges. As he arrived at the studio early that morning, he was greeted by a flurry of activity. Producers, writers, and executives huddled together, discussing how to address the fallout from the previous night. The episode featuring Keanu had already become one of the most talked about moments in the show's history, but not necessarily for reasons they would have wanted. Jimmy sat down with his team, visibly tired, as they reviewed clips of the interview and strategized ways to mitigate the damage. Later that afternoon, Jimmy addressed the controversy during his opening monologue. Sitting behind his desk, he looked directly into the camera, his expression serious but sincere. "Last night something unexpected happened," he began, pausing briefly before continuing. "I asked questions that made Keanu uncomfortable, and I take full responsibility for that. It wasn't my intention to upset him, and I deeply regret if anything I said crossed a line." His voice carried a note of genuine remorse, and the audience responded with respectful applause. Jimmy went on to acknowledge the broader conversation sparked by the incident. "This has been a reminder, for me and maybe for all of us, that celebrities are human beings too. They deserve respect and understanding just like anyone else." He concluded by thanking Keanu for being honest about his feelings, adding, "Sometimes we learn the hard way, and last night was definitely one of those times." Though some viewers appreciated Jimmy's apology, others felt it came across as too little, too late. Critics argued that while he expressed regret, he hadn't fully addressed why he'd pushed so hard in the first place. As the day wore on, news outlets picked up the story, devoting entire segments to dissecting the clash. Talk shows, podcasts, and opinion pieces weighed in, offering their perspectives on everything from celebrity culture to the ethics of interviewing. Late-night hosts joked about the incident, with some poking fun at Jimmy's awkward handling of the situation, and others praising Keanu for drawing a line in the sand. Even daytime television got involved, with hosts debating whether Keanu's actions were justified or overly dramatic. The sheer volume of coverage turned the event into a cultural phenomenon, ensuring it wouldn't fade from public memory anytime soon. For Keanu, the attention was both overwhelming and validating. Fans rallied around him, sharing stories of how his movies and persona had inspired them over the years. Many admired his willingness to prioritize self-respect over popularity, seeing it as a rare display of courage in an industry driven by image and approval. Online petitions even emerged, calling for networks to give Keanu his own platform where he could share his thoughts without fear of exploitation. These gestures touched him deeply, reinforcing his belief that staying true to oneself mattered more than pleasing others. However, not everyone viewed the situation through such a positive lens. Some industry insiders whispered that Keanu's decision might harm his career, suggesting that walking off a major talk show could alienate potential collaborators. Directors, producers, and casting agents reportedly debated whether working with him might invite similar complications in the future. While no official statements were made, rumors swirled about canceled meetings and hesitations from studios. Yet Keanu remained unfazed. If anything, the backlash only strengthened his resolve to remain authentic, regardless of the consequences. By evening, the narrative began shifting slightly. Journalists started digging deeper into the dynamics of celebrity interviews, questioning whether late-night shows like Jimmy Kimmel Live often blurred the lines between harmless banter and intrusive probing. Experts in psychology and media ethics joined the discussion, pointing out that public figures frequently face pressure to share intimate details of their lives, even when doing so compromises their mental health. This angle resonated with many, particularly younger audiences who empathized with the idea of guarding personal boundaries in an increasingly invasive world. In the midst of all this, Keanu received an outpouring of support from fellow actors. Friends like Sandra Bullock, who had worked with him on Speed, publicly defended him, saying, "Keanu is one of the kindest, most genuine people I know. He doesn't deserve to have his pain turned into entertainment." Other Hollywood stars echoed similar sentiments, using their platforms to amplify the message that celebrities shouldn't be forced to endure insensitive questioning under the guise of promotion. These endorsements helped shift the tone of the conversation, steering it away from criticism and toward solidarity. Despite the chaos surrounding him, Keanu maintained his composure. He avoided issuing formal statements or granting interviews to clarify his side of the story, letting his initial remarks outside the studio speak for themselves. Instead, he focused on what truly mattered to him, his craft. Over the next few days, he threw himself into preparing for his upcoming projects, channeling his energy into roles that allowed him to express himself creatively without exposing his vulnerabilities unnecessarily. For Keanu, acting had always been a form of escape, a way to connect with others while maintaining a sense of distance, and now, more than ever, it served as a refuge. As the week progressed, the frenzy gradually subsided, though the ripple effects lingered. Late-night hosts continued referencing the incident in their routines, comedians incorporated it into their stand-up acts, and social media remained abuzz with memes and commentary. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel worked to rebuild trust with his audience, hosting subsequent episodes with a renewed sensitivity toward his guests' comfort levels. Viewers noticed the change, applauding his efforts to grow from the experience. For Keanu, the episode became a defining moment, not because it showcased his anger or frustration, but because it highlighted his unwavering commitment to integrity. In an era dominated by carefully curated personas and relentless scrutiny, he stood apart as someone willing to risk backlash in order to protect his humanity. And though the road ahead promised its share of challenges, Keanu walked it with quiet confidence, secure in the knowledge that he had done the right thing, not just for himself but for anyone who believed in the importance of respecting boundaries. A week had passed since the explosive incident on Jimmy Kimmel Live, but its effects continued to ripple through Hollywood and beyond. For Keanu Reeves, life began to settle into a new rhythm. While the initial storm of reactions had been intense, he chose to step back from the chaos, focusing instead on what brought him peace, his work, and the people who mattered most to him. Friends noticed that he seemed more reflective than usual, often spending hours alone or engaging in deep conversations about art, purpose, and the nature of fame. To those close to him, it was clear that the confrontation with Jimmy had stirred something within Keanu, a renewed determination to live life on his own terms. At the same time, the media frenzy showed no signs of slowing down. Late-night comedians still joked about the clash, turning it into a recurring punchline during their monologues. One host quipped, "If you want to get Keanu Reeves off your show, just ask him about his feelings." The audience laughed, but there was an underlying respect for Keanu's decision to walk away. Even critics who initially dismissed his actions as overly dramatic softened their stance, acknowledging that the actor had sparked an important conversation about privacy in the public eye. Slowly but surely, the narrative shifted from questioning Keanu's behavior to celebrating his courage. For Jimmy Kimmel, the aftermath proved more challenging. Despite issuing a heartfelt apology on air, some viewers remained skeptical of his intentions. Social media users dissected every word he said, debating whether his regret was genuine or merely a calculated attempt to save face. Behind the scenes, Jimmy wrestled with self-doubt. Known for his quick wit and charm, he prided himself on creating a welcoming environment for his guests. Yet now, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd failed, not just as a host, but as a person. Colleagues noticed a change in him. He became quieter, more introspective, and noticeably cautious when interviewing other celebrities. During one particularly awkward episode, Jimmy found himself tiptoeing around a guest's personal life, avoiding any question that might be seen as invasive. When the guest teased him about being too polite, Jimmy forced a laugh, but it was clear he was struggling to find balance. His team tried to reassure him, reminding him that mistakes happen and that growth comes from learning. Still, the shadow of Keanu's departure loomed large over the show, serving as a constant reminder of the fine line between curiosity and intrusion. Meanwhile, the broader entertainment industry took note of the incident. Producers and executives began reevaluating how they approached celebrity interviews, recognizing the potential risks of pushing too hard for sensational content. Some networks even implemented guidelines to ensure guests felt safe and respected during appearances. These changes were subtle but significant, reflecting a growing awareness of the pressures faced by public figures. For Keanu, this shift validated his decision to speak out. Though he hadn't intended to spark reform, he hoped his actions might inspire others to prioritize empathy over entertainment. As days turned into weeks, Keanu quietly returned to work, immersing himself in his latest film project. On set, he was the same calm, professional presence everyone admired. Crew members marveled at his ability to compartmentalize, leaving behind the drama of the past while pouring his energy into bringing his character to life. During breaks, he often chatted with co-stars and directors, sharing stories and laughter, as if nothing unusual had happened. But occasionally, someone would mention the Jimmy Kimmel incident, prompting nods of admiration and expressions of support. Keanu always responded graciously, thanking them before steering the conversation toward lighter topics. Fans also played a crucial role in shaping the narrative. Across social media, countless posts celebrated Keanu's integrity, with many dubbing him a real-life John Wick for standing up to perceived injustice. Memes comparing him to his iconic action hero roles circulated widely, blending humor with reverence. Others shared heartfelt messages, expressing gratitude for his authenticity and resilience. For many, Keanu represented not just a beloved actor, but a symbol of hope, a reminder that it's possible to stay grounded despite overwhelming scrutiny. Yet not all reactions were positive. A vocal minority continued to criticize Keanu, accusing him of being difficult or ungrateful. Some argued that celebrities should expect invasive questions as part of the job, dismissing his concerns as overly sensitive. Tabloids seized on these perspectives, publishing articles questioning whether Keanu's reputation could withstand the backlash. Despite the negativity, Keanu refused to engage. He knew better than to feed into the cycle of controversy, choosing instead to let his work speak for itself. In the midst of this whirlwind, Keanu made a surprising move. He accepted an invitation to appear on a different late-night talk show. The announcement sent shockwaves through the entertainment world, with fans speculating about his reasons. Was he trying to prove he wasn't afraid of interviews? Or did he simply want to put the Jimmy Kimmel incident behind him? Whatever his motivations, the appearance marked a turning point in the ongoing saga. The night of the interview arrived, and anticipation ran high. Hosts across competing networks watched nervously, wondering how Keanu would handle the situation. Would he address the Jimmy Kimmel fiasco directly? Would he set boundaries up front? As Keanu walked onto the stage, dressed casually in his signature leather jacket, the audience erupted into applause. The host greeted him warmly, clearly mindful of the delicate context. After exchanging pleasantries, the conversation began. And, to everyone's relief, it stayed lighthearted and focused on Keanu's career. When the topic inevitably turned to the Jimmy Kimmel incident, Keanu handled it with characteristic grace. I think we've all moved on, he said with a small smile. It was a moment and moments pass. What matters is learning from them. His words resonated deeply, earning praise from viewers and critics alike. By refusing to dwell on the past, Keanu demonstrated maturity and wisdom, reinforcing his status as a role model both on and off screen. Backstage after the show, reporters swarmed Keanu once again, eager for sound bites. But true to form, he kept his responses brief and thoughtful. Life is about growth, he told them. We all make mistakes, and we all have opportunities to do better. That's what I'm focusing on. With that, he slipped away, leaving, the crowd buzzing with admiration. For Jimmy Kimmel, watching Keanu navigate the situation with such poise offered a glimmer of redemption. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Jimmy later admitted in an interview that Keanu's ability to rise above the controversy inspired him to strive for greater empathy in his own work. He didn't have to forgive me, Jimmy confessed, but the way he handled everything. It reminded me why I love doing this job, to connect with people, not alienate them. As the weeks stretched into months, the clash between Keanu and Jimmy faded from headlines, replaced by newer scandals and stories. Yet its impact endured, shaping conversations about privacy, respect, and the responsibilities of those in the spotlight. For Keanu, it served as a testament to the power of staying true to oneself, even when the world watches closely. And for Jimmy, it became a lesson in humility, reminding him that sometimes the hardest truths lead to the greatest growth. Months had passed since the explosive incident on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And while the dust had mostly settled, its echoes continued to resonate in unexpected ways. For Keanu Reeves, life moved forward with a renewed sense of purpose. He had always been known for his quiet humility and dedication to his craft, but now he carried himself with an added layer of confidence, a subtle assurance that came from standing firm in his beliefs. Friends and colleagues noticed the change, describing him as more grounded and at peace than ever before. It was as if the confrontation had stripped away any lingering doubts about who he was and what mattered most to him. Work remained Keanu's sanctuary. On set, he poured his energy into perfecting every scene, bringing depth and authenticity to his roles. Directors marveled at his ability to transform challenges into opportunities, using the emotional weight of recent events to fuel his performances. During downtime, he often retreated to his trailer, reading scripts or sketching ideas for future projects. Occasionally, he'd step outside to greet fans who gathered near the filming location, signing autographs and taking photos with a warmth that never failed to leave a lasting impression. To Keanu, these small moments of connection were reminders of why he loved what he did, not for fame or fortune, but for the chance to share stories that moved people. Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel found himself navigating uncharted territory. The incident had left a mark, not just on his reputation but on how he approached his role as a late-night host. In the weeks following the clash, he made a conscious effort to listen more and push less, ensuring his guests felt comfortable sharing only what they wanted to. This shift didn't go unnoticed. Viewers began commenting on the noticeable difference in tone during interviews, praising Jimmy for creating a safer space for honest conversations. Yet beneath the surface, Jimmy still grappled with self-doubt. Despite the positive feedback, he couldn't shake the memory of Keanu walking off his show, a moment that haunted him like a ghost. To cope, Jimmy sought advice from mentors and peers in the industry. One evening, over dinner with a close friend, he opened up about his struggles. "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. His friend listened patiently before offering perspective. "You can't undo the past, but you can learn from it," they said gently. "What matters is how you grow moving forward." Those words stuck with Jimmy, becoming a mantra he repeated to himself whenever doubt crept in. As time went on, Jimmy started incorporating lessons from the incident into his hosting style. He began each interview by setting clear expectations, asking guests up front if there were topics they preferred to avoid. He also worked closely with his team to research guests' backgrounds thoroughly, ensuring questions were thoughtful rather then invasive. These changes weren't flashy or dramatic, but they made a world of difference. Guests responded positively, often thanking Jimmy for his sensitivity and professionalism. Slowly but surely, the shadow of the Keanu incident began to lift, replaced by a newfound respect for Jimmy's growth as a host. In Hollywood, the ripple effects of the clash continued to shape the landscape of celebrity culture. Networks and producers took note of the backlash Jimmy faced, realizing the importance of treating public figures with dignity and respect. Some implemented stricter guidelines for interviews, requiring hosts to review questions beforehand and seek approval from guests when discussing sensitive subjects. Others organized workshops to educate staff on ethical interviewing practices, emphasizing the need for empathy and understanding. While these measures weren't perfect, they signaled a step in the right direction, a recognition that celebrities deserve the same boundaries as anyone else. For Keanu, the broader impact of the incident was both humbling and inspiring. Fans around the world reached out to share how his actions had resonated with them personally. Many described feeling empowered to set their own boundaries, whether in relationships, workplaces, or social settings. Seeing someone like Keanu stand up for themselves reminded me that it's okay to say no, one fan wrote in a heartfelt letter. Another shared, "You showed us that staying true to yourself is worth any risk." These messages touched Keanu, deeply reinforcing his belief in the power of authenticity. Despite the overwhelming support, Keanu remained humble, deflecting praise whenever possible. When asked about the incident in rare interviews, he spoke candidly but briefly, focusing on the bigger picture. "It's not about me," he would say. "It's about respecting each other's humanity. We're all just trying to navigate this crazy world the best we can." His words resonated widely, sparking discussions about vulnerability, resilience, and the courage it takes to draw a line in the sand. As the months rolled on, Keanu's career flourished. His latest film premiered to critical acclaim, earning rave reviews for his performance. Audiences flocked to theaters, eager to see their hero back in action. Critics praised not only his acting chops but also his unwavering commitment to authenticity, noting how his real-life integrity translated seamlessly onto the screen. At award shows and red carpet events, Keanu handled questions with grace, steering conversations toward his work while maintaining a polite distance from personal topics. Reporters respected his boundaries, knowing full well the consequences of crossing them. Backstage at one such event, a young journalist approached Keanu nervously, clutching a notebook and pen. "Mr. Reeves, thank you for taking the time," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I just wanted to say, your bravery inspired me to leave a toxic job where I wasn't treated fairly." Keanu smiled warmly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for sharing that," he replied softly. "Remember, you have the strength to stand up for yourself too." The encounter left the journalist teary-eyed but inspired, a testament to the profound effect Keanu's actions had on those around him. For Jimmy, watching Keanu's success from afar served as a bittersweet reminder of the missed opportunity to reconnect with him. Though he occasionally fantasized about inviting Keanu back onto his show, he knew better than to force the issue. Instead, he channeled his regret into gratitude, using the experience as motivation to continue improving. In interviews, he openly acknowledged the lessons he'd learned, crediting Keanu, albeit indirectly, for helping him become a better version of himself. "Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need to hear," he reflected during one segment. "And sometimes they come from the people we least expect." By the end of the year, the clash between Keanu and Jimmy had transformed from a scandal into a story of growth and redemption. Both men emerged stronger, shaped by the challenges they faced and the choices they made. For Keanu, it reinforced his belief in staying true to oneself, even when the world watches closely. For Jimmy, it taught him the value of humility and the importance of treating others with kindness. Together, albeit indirectly, they sparked a cultural shift, a reminder that everyone, regardless of status or fame, deserves to be heard, respected, and understood. And so, as the calendar turned to a new year, the legacy of that fateful night lived on, not as a tale of conflict, but as a testament to the power of resilience, reflection, and the enduring human spirit. As the new year unfolded, the incident between Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel had become more than just a story. It was now woven into the fabric of popular culture. People referenced it in conversations about boundaries, respect, and personal growth. For Keanu, life continued to hum along quietly, filled with work he loved and moments that reminded him why he chose this path in the first place. His days were spent on set, rehearsing lines, perfecting stunts, and collaborating with talented filmmakers who admired his dedication. Off camera, he remained the same humble figure fans adored, gracious, thoughtful, and deeply connected to the world around him. Keanu's recent film release proved to be another milestone in his career. Critics hailed it as one of his best performances yet, praising not only his technical skill, but also the emotional depth he brought to the role. Audiences flocked to theaters, eager to see their favorite actor back in action. At press events and premieres, Keanu handled interviews with characteristic poise, deflecting overly personal questions with humor and tact. Reporters quickly learned to respect his boundaries, knowing full well that pushing too hard would earn them nothing but polite silence. This mutual understanding created a refreshing dynamic, one rooted in professionalism and mutual respect. Fans continued to rally around Keanu, celebrating him not just as an actor, but as a symbol of integrity. Social media remained ablaze with tributes, memes, and heartfelt messages thanking him for standing up for himself. Many shared stories of how his actions inspired them to assert their own boundaries, whether at work, in relationships, or within their communities. One fan wrote online, "Keanu showed us that saying no isn't selfish, it's necessary. He gave me the courage to quit a job where I was being mistreated." Another commented, "He reminded me that we don't owe anyone our pain. We can protect ourselves while still being kind." Meanwhile, Jimmy Kimmel worked tirelessly to rebuild trust, not just with his audience, but with himself. Hosting a late-night talk show required quick thinking and adaptability, skills Jimmy honed over years of experience. Yet after the incident, he approached each episode with a heightened sense of awareness, carefully considering every question before asking it. Guests noticed the change immediately, often remarking on how comfortable they felt during interviews. Some even went out of their way to thank Jimmy for creating such a welcoming atmosphere. Behind the scenes, Jimmy reflected on the lessons he'd learned. The memory of Keanu walking off his show still lingered, serving as both a cautionary tale and a source of motivation. In private moments, he thought about reaching out to Keanu directly, perhaps to apologize again or simply express gratitude for the unintended wisdom he'd gained. But Jimmy knew better than to force the issue. If Keanu ever wanted to reconnect, he would do so in his own time. Until then, Jimmy focused on channeling his regret into positive action, using the experience to become a better host, and ultimately, a better person. The entertainment industry as a whole began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. Networks implemented stricter guidelines for interviews, requiring hosts to review questions ahead of time and seek approval from guests when discussing sensitive topics. Producers organized workshops to educate staff on ethical interviewing practices, emphasizing the importance of empathy and consent. These changes weren't always easy to implement, but they signaled a growing recognition of the humanity behind the celebrity persona. Slowly but surely, the line between curiosity and intrusion began to blur less frequently. For Keanu, these developments validated his decision to walk away that night. Though he hadn't intended to spark reform, he hoped his actions might inspire others to prioritize respect over sensationalism. And indeed they did. Across social media, fans and critics alike praised the newfound emphasis on dignity and privacy, calling it long overdue. Even late-night hosts joked about the Keanu rule, a tongue-in-cheek guideline reminding everyone to tread lightly when asking personal questions. While the term was meant to amuse, it underscored a deeper truth. Keanu's stand had left an indelible mark on the industry. Despite the ongoing attention, Keanu remained focused on what truly mattered to him. He cherished quiet moments, reading by the window, taking long walks through nature, or spending time with close friends. Those who knew him well described him as content, almost serene, as if the weight of the past had finally lifted. Occasionally, he'd reflect on the incident, marveling at how something so unexpected had shaped his life in profound ways. To Keanu, it wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about staying true to himself, even when the stakes felt impossibly high. One evening, as Keanu prepared for bed, he received a message from an old friend. Attached was a link to a video clip, a young woman speaking passionately at a community event about the importance of setting boundaries. "I never thought I could say no until I saw someone like Keanu do it," she said, her voice steady and strong. Keanu watched the clip several times, feeling a swell of emotion rise in his chest. It was moments like these that reminded him why authenticity mattered, not for accolades, but for connection. For Jimmy, the journey toward redemption reached a turning point during a particularly memorable episode of his show. After wrapping up an interview with a guest, he turned to the camera and addressed the audience directly. "You know, sometimes mistakes teach us the hardest lessons," he began, his tone sincere. "A while back I crossed a line, and it made me realize how important it is to treat people with kindness and respect. I'm still learning, but I hope I've grown because of it." The room erupted in applause, and viewers at home praised Jimmy for his honesty. What started as a moment of regret had transformed into a testament to resilience and self-improvement. As the months stretched into years, the clash between Keanu and Jimmy faded from headlines, replaced by newer stories and scandals. Yet its impact endured, shaping conversations about privacy, empathy, and the responsibilities of those in the public eye. For Keanu, it served as a reminder of the power of staying true to oneself, even when the world watches closely. And for Jimmy, it became a lesson in humility, proving that growth often comes from discomfort. In the end, the legacy of that fateful night wasn't defined by conflict or controversy. Instead, it stood as a testament to two men navigating their humanity in the spotlight, one choosing to protect his dignity, the other striving to grow from his mistakes. Together, albeit indirectly, they sparked a cultural shift, a reminder that everyone deserves to be heard, respected, and understood. And as the curtain fell on this chapter of their lives, both Keanu and Jimmy emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to living authentically in a world that rarely slows down enough to listen.